Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. After the French Grand Prix, it does appear many believe that we may have seen the beginning of the end of this year's title race. Max Verstappen now with a commanding lead in the World Drivers' Championship. Lewis Hamilton describes it as a massive gap that should well be smooth sailing from here to the rest of the season. A pretty much unassailable gap in Lewis Hamilton's opinion. We can't rule anything out though, things can still certainly change. Verstappen is not saying by any means as of yet that he's got this one locked up, but the numbers do not lie. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. It really helps out the channel. Thanks very much indeed for doing that one. Thanks also for 5,000 subs. Big milestone of yesterday. Let's crack straight on with things and keep those numbers rolling, baby. A couple of updates first of all on the upgrade side. Firstly from, well, the Haas F1 team. Magnussen is going to get their final, I believe, big upgrade package of the year that's going to arrive in Hungary. Only Kevin Magnussen's going to get it. He's ahead of Mick in the kind of points right now, so they're going to give it to their leading driver, and maybe Mick Schumacher's actually going to get an engine penalty as well because Ferrari power units potentially at Spa. So that's another reason really here. You can look at the points differential that Verstappen has, but then you've also got to consider the fact that Ferrari might even need to take more engine penalties, and probably the way it's currently looking, Red Bull might be able to make it to the end of the season with their normal allocation, which is a big deal because of course, like at both times that Leclerc and Sainz have started from the back, they've made it only to P5, right? P90 to P5 on both occasions. And if that happens again on current form of the cars, Verstappen's probably going to win the race, right? If that's the case, then of course, well, it means the championship might well be not far until it's actually decided. Now, this also wanted to mention on with regard to penalties, because we've seen this a couple of times recently. Ocon lost control of the car, spun Tsunoda around in that chicane. Like, I think it was a first lap incident, colder tires, it kind of stuff can happen, but it ruined Yuki's race, right? He was out, he had damage, like it couldn't complete the rest of the race, and Ocon gets a 5-second penalty, which as time progresses really doesn't affect his race that much. Maybe he got one more place, but all things considered, didn't ruin his race at all, and then Tsunoda's race is over. So there has been some talk about, okay, if you actually do cause a collision, is it possible that we bring back the stop and go penalties or the drive-through penalties that you used to get often for causing a collision back in the day? They really don't seem to be used anymore, and also the 5 seconds is pretty much irrelevant for a lot of the top teams at least. Like, if you're George Russell, you can afford to kind of send it down the inside of Sergio Perez, because let's say you do have the collision and you're deemed to have caused it, you probably get a 5-second penalty, and you've got no threat from behind anyway, so you might as well give it a go. So it definitely disproportionately affects the teams in the midfield that are maybe fighting for positions very much so and have very little time gaps between them. So I think there's some thought to be done really on how the penalty system is discussed. But let's talk about the title race. Ferrari versus Red Bull. Well, maybe it's actually Ferrari versus Mercedes, right? Because it seems like Ferrari, more and more likely by the day, might well be playing for third place in the two-way title battle, which is kind of incredible they've managed to pull this one off. But their car is probably the best on the grid. That's the most absurd thing about this, that in qualifying trim, and it seems in the race trim yesterday, Ferrari have the best car right now. They have their upgrades seem to be working maybe slightly better than Red Bull. And you must say right here that Red Bull kind of seem to just tweak their floor around, don't really make that much progress. Ferrari have made advances forwards and seem to be the better car in probably race pace and, of course, in qualifying as well. And Bonotto says that there will be reliability upgrades coming. So it's incredible how Ferrari can manage to perform so poorly in terms of points with the machinery they actually have this season. It just seems like they don't know what to do when they actually get a winning car. And even as Ralf Schumacher says, pretty harsh words, the greatest support for Red Bull and Max Verstappen in this championship is called Ferrari, right? They are the biggest fans of Red Bull, it seems, because, well, they're gifting them points left, right, and centre right now. And we've seen 75 points have gone astray for Charles Leclerc in the lead of races so far this season, of course, in France, in Spain, and in Azerbaijan as well. Of course, the last two of those, I suppose the first two of those two that happened in the season, Spain, Baku, and then France, the first two weren't his fault. The most recent one was, as we looked at yesterday. But this is what it looks like in terms of recent points score. This is kind of incredible, actually. This is points after Australia. Leclerc has scored the 6th most points, I guess, tied with Hamilton for 5th over the last, however many. I mean, Australia was, the 3rd race of the season. So in the last, 9 races, these are the points. Verstappen, Perez dominating, and somehow Sainz and Leclerc are 5 points ahead of Mercedes, despite having a far superior car. It looks even worse, really, if you look at the last 6 rounds. Verstappen has pretty much doubled Leclerc's score over the last 6 rounds. Hamilton actually has scored the 2nd most points in the last 6 races. Verstappen, of course, number 1, then Leclerc, then Perez, then Russell, all ahead of Leclerc, right? So that just goes to show the way the season started, the way it is now. It's really difficult to see Leclerc overturning this points disadvantage to Verstappen, because the thing is with Max so that he just finishes all the races. And Ferrari, after yesterday, are now officially last in the laps completed championship, I suppose. It's McLaren, Aston Martin, Mercedes. Mercedes would be number one if not for the Russell incident at Silverstone, but Ferrari have completed the least laps of any team this season. Red Bull are kind of middle of the pack here, but they're still doing pretty well as of late. But Ferrari, I mean, they're the bottom of the league. And actually, if you look here at all the, well, Ferrari-powered teams, Alfa Romeo, Haas, Ferrari, like, I mean, yeah, that's just kind of how it's gone. Add into that the strategic issues they've had with certain calls and the mistakes that started to creep into Leclerc's game. And like, I mean, you really can't see them winning this championship, right? It's difficult to see because they have the best car they've had in years, but they just can't seem to convert any of that performance into results. And that's also the thing about Charles Leclerc as a driver. I do think as an individual, he's driven, like his peak performance might even have been better than Max's this season. I think Charles Leclerc on his day has been an incredibly tactical, astute driver. His qualifying has been phenomenal. But, you know, Max nowadays, in previous seasons, he's had this kind of crash Verstappen thing going on. But like nowadays, he just seems pretty much flawless at times, doesn't make a mistake, doesn't make the errors that have crept into Leclerc's performances recently. And that just makes him, you know, at times a pretty imperious driver, right? When Leclerc crashed out, there was no doubt Verstappen was going to win that race. Similar really to how in previous seasons, Lewis Hamilton would get into turn one first in a dominant Mercedes, and you just know that 60 laps later, it's going to be Hamilton wins the Grand Prix. It feels the same with Verstappen at the moment. And Hamilton probably sees some of his like dominant self in Verstappen right now. He just seems pretty much unassailable with Ferrari performing as they presently are. And maybe Mercedes individually can get up there as well if their car keeps improving. But, you know, for now, like no one's touching Verstappen outside of the Ferraris, and they shoot themselves in the foot again and again. And as Hamilton now says, he expects it to be smooth sailing for Verstappen with a massive point advantage. As Hamilton says following the race yesterday, it's obviously a pretty huge title lead. I'm gutted for Charles, who's been doing a great job, as has Carlos. It's not easy though, having that pace and that performance and then maintaining it. It's a tough job, I feel, for the whole team because I know what that can feel like, but they are a great team. They'll continue to keep their heads down. A massive gap. It's pretty smooth sailing in that space generally. So Hamilton had experience with big title leads that, well, have barely ever blown away. It would be something for this to be overturned. As he says, a lot can still go wrong up ahead. I would advise him just to keep on pushing. Like, I mean, still, Red Bull reliability issues could creep back in. They're still going to need a fair few more victories, but you wouldn't really put them past them actually achieving that, right? And even Helmut Marko says that he reckons they only really need 3 to 5 more victories. That's the thing. If Verstappen keeps getting P2, P3, like in a lot of these races, it's going to take so much for Ferrari to overturn that deficit, right? Like, if it's a P1, P2 every week, like Verstappen loses, what, 7 points a week or something, 7, 8 points a week, even coming P2. That's why Ferrari need their car and their reliability to get better and their strategic decisions to get better and their drivers to be flawless, but also they need Mercedes to be the second best team and, you know, beating out Red Bull every race so that they can gain those points back over Verstappen. But it just seems incredibly unlikely that that's going to happen the way things have been going so far. Verstappen isn't kind of resting on his laurels. He does say, yes, a lot of things can happen. Don't really look at the lead, just trying to focus race by race, but he must feel that he's got this one in the bag to some degree. He's saying that the lead is bigger than it should have been, which of course is true, right? Even with the mistakes that Leclerc has made, if not for the reliability, the championship would pretty much be level pegging, to be honest, right? And even the victories that Leclerc maybe would have had without the reliability issues, Verstappen gets less points in those races, therefore probably Leclerc still leading the championship at this point. But 63 points is a lot and is incredibly challenging to overturn. The crazy thing about this, actually, if you look at the numbers here, is that Hamilton is closer to Leclerc than Leclerc is to Verstappen, right? Hamilton's down here in P6. He's, I mean, what is this? 43 points behind Leclerc. That's 20 points closer to Leclerc, Hamilton is, than Leclerc even is to Verstappen, right? So it just goes to show that it's really not over in the race for second place here in the constructors, or even second place in the drivers. Like, who knows what's going to happen here if Mercedes get their act together and Ferrari keep throwing away points. What can actually happen? Could Mercedes get P2 in the constructors? Could they even get P2 in the drivers? Is that possible? It seems unlikely, of course, but I mean, yeah, the pace of the cars doesn't seem to be having much difference in the way that Ferrari are actually delivering the points week in, week out. But Hamilton is looking at this table and looking at Verstappen and thinking, yeah, Verstappen is probably away and gone this season. That it might just well be an unassailable lead. Of course, it's still possible mathematically, but it might even be locked up this season with 3 or 4 races to go. That's not out of the realms of possibility the way things are currently trending. But maybe with the pressure off Ferrari a little bit, like they can start performing better. But if anything, the pressure just gets greater and greater because they need to deliver results and they need to do that quickly. So into your thoughts on this one in the comment section below. Just this dimension as well from Hamilton, because of course he had a brief look at the back of Verstappen and was trying to make something happen there, but in the end obviously didn't have the pace in the car to try and keep that challenge up for the long term. Did manage to beat, both Mercedes did, Perez on on pace, so that was a good step for them in the right direction, get both on the podium, but actually taking down Verstappen is going to require their car to hit new levels. That probably isn't going to happen until at least after the summer break, but very much enjoyed your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new as always, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.